We'll get started. So I guess at some point, it's no longer a new year, but let's just say it's still enough of a new year for me to wish you all a happy new year. Certainly is our first meeting of the year. So thanks everyone for joining. And so before we go any further, I am going to turn it over to Matt, who will go through the necessary information about our remote meetings.
Thank you very much, Len, and Happy New Year to everyone. Just going to run through the guidelines here. So all participants will join this meeting with muted microphones. You will notice that you are muted. If you could please rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation, should you have one, that would be great. To participate in the discussion, you can select the raise hand function. You can find this in a few different places depending on which version of Zoom you have. This may just be located directly on the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. It may be under the reactions button. And if you have a quite old version of Zoom, it may be under the participants menu, which is also found at the bottom of your screen. If you are calling into this meeting, you can use *9 to raise your hand and *6 to mute and unmute yourself. And everyone can freely mute and unmute themselves. Just please try to be respectful of people who are currently speaking. And if you have any technical difficulties, you can contact me, Matt Archer, either via the chat box at marcher@ctps.org or at 857-702-3708. And with that, I will turn it back over to Len for introductions.
And thank you, Matt. So yeah, we'll just go around well, not around the table, up and down the list of participants in the meeting. So I'll call folks out, and you can just tell us your name again and your organization, anything else you want. And so starting from the top of my screen, I have John Seward.
John Seward, Booth, Mass. And Happy New Year to all.
Thank you, John. Next, I have Abby Swain.
Sorry about that. I couldn't find my button. Abby Swain, US EPA Region 1, Boston.
Yeah, thank you, Abby. And Andy Reeker.
Good afternoon, Andy Reeker with the City of Cambridge. Feliz Año Nuevo para todos.
Nice. And next, have Colette Frank.
Hi, yes, this is Colette Frank. I'm with the Wellesley Select Board. Thanks for having this meeting today.
Thank you for joining us. And next, we have Gail. Well, we'll come back to Gail. Jen Rowe.
Hello, everyone. Jen Rowe, City of Boston.
Jen. Next, John McLean.
Happy Wednesday. John McQueen, Walk Boston.
Thank you, John. Next, we have Michaela Comas.
Livable Streets Alliance.
Thank you, Micaiah. I guess I got that right enough. And next we have Owen McDonald.
Owen McDonald, Town of Weymouth. Happy New Year.
Thank you, Owen. And next we have Steve Olenoff.
Hi, Steve Olenoff. For this meeting, I'm really representing the Trick subregion.
Thank you, Steve. And next we have Wig.
Yeah, hi everybody, Wig Zamor. I don't dare rename myself because I might fumble it and disappear. But I'm on T-Rock with Len, and in Somerville, I'm a co-founder of STEP and Mystic View Task Force.
Scrolling back up, I see that Franny Osmond has snuck in.
I snuck in the back door. Yeah, Wig, if you try to rename yourself, you might turn into a cat. So I am Franny Osmond from Acton, Mass. Also Vice Chair of Magic and on the Lowell Regional Transit Authority Board as a rider. Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's I varies depending on the day. I have different roles. I've just been volunteering on public transportation for 16 years now. So
Great. Thank you, Franny. And you're not on the move today. Yeah. So,
you know what? The dog, he looks lazy, but he would rather be out there. So.
Okay. Well, maybe you'll be on the move later on. Coming in is Fred Mosley. I'm hesitating a little bit just in case his audio hasn't hooked up. Fred, are you ready to introduce yourself?
It looks like Fred is not connected to audio at the moment. Maybe I'm wrong. No, Fred is now connected to audio. So Fred, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Must be the introductions phase. Sorry, I'm late. Fred Mosley, representing the American Council of Engineering Companies.
Great, thank you, Fred. And we'll go back to Gail.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for letting us consumers be in here. I'm out in Natick. I'm a writer and got rid of my car and regularly use the T, and I'm very grateful for it and would like to help in any way that I can. Thanks.
Well, you're welcome. And when it comes to government, we're all consumers.
That's true.
So that's, we're happy to have you here, and thank you. And I see a phone number that ends with 7495, and
Barry Steinberg, Association for Public Transportation.
Hi, Barry. It's as if I just heard your voice yesterday, huh? So that's because we were in a meeting together yesterday. So let me swing back because actually I'll save, I'm sorry, Scott Zekas.
Hi, Scott Zedekias, Vice Chair of RTAC and also with the National Rural Transit Assistance Program, otherwise known as RTAP. So good to see you all in the new year.
Great. And I'm Leonard Diggins, and as Wig told you, I am also under MBTA Rider Oversight Committee, and I represent them on this committee. And so I'm going to save the last person for last, because that person is our first guest at this meeting. And so I'll give a quick little introduction and say that she's the Executive Director of the Central Transportation Planning Staff, and she was the chair of this committee previously. And such a great resource. I mean, it's really great being on the board with her. And so I'm always delighted to have her come back to talk with us each year. And so at the beginning of 2022, we get to hear from Tegan Tyke.
Thanks, Len. Hi, everyone. So many friendly faces. It's very good to see you all. I think we have passed by several months my 2-year anniversary in this role as the executive director of the staff to the Boston MPO. And so more than 2 years since I sat with you in our TAC meetings and on the MPO board myself. But for those of you who don't know me, that's why I feel like I know everyone in the room pretty well, among other reasons. So Len asked me back to just say a few things. I'm very happy to be conversational. I have in my mind a few talking points that I want to share with you that I think would be nice, kind of in 2 areas. One is an update on the first year of the implementation of our strategic plans, where we are as an agency right now in terms of the staff to the Boston Region MPO. For those who might be less familiar, we're approaching 60 people, and you do see a lot of the staff here, but there's a lot of staff that you don't actually see necessarily at RTAC meetings that are doing a lot of the transportation planning work for the region. And so I thought we'd check in on where we are as an agency, and then also talk at a high level on where we are with the policy and funding implications of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, because that always seems to be a primary topic of interest. And so in those 2 areas, I think the overarching message I have right now is that it's a very exciting time for MPOs, to be honest. There's many, many challenges right now that we're all facing, but for the regional work that we do from both the funding and a work perspective, it is actually a very interesting and exciting time. So with that, I can just kind of chat a bit, Len. Do you want to do it as a Q&A, or do you want me to just sort of chat through? You can welcome to stop me if you'd like at any point. Oh, you're muted, but I'm assuming.
Yeah, sorry about that. Let's just start with whatever you have on your mind, and then we'll just make it more discussion so that And we'll do the raise hand thing. So whenever someone wants to speak, just raise their hand. And I guess do you want me to call on them, Tegan, or will you see their hands raised and you can call on them?
I should be able to see their hands raised. I can see everyone right now. So unless something changes on the screen for me, I will be able to see people if they raise their hand.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, okay, great. Thanks, Glenn. All right, so talking about us as an agency, the staff to the Boston MPO and where we are, for those of you who heard me talking last year, and hopefully you've heard about it other than that, we established a 5-year strategic plan to transform the agency. And we are now in the first year of implementing that strategic plan. So the strategic plan years are on the state fiscal year calendar. So we consider them to be July 1 to June 30th. So we're about halfway through that first year. The strategic plan is more of they can be different things. This one's more of an internal facing one, focused, as I mentioned, on organizational change, which is something that I committed to when I first took on this role as the executive director of the staff. So as just a quick reminder, if you want any more information, feel free to follow up. There's lots of information out there, but just to ground you in what the values and the topic areas are in that plan, the values that we've agreed upon as an agency are collaboration, diversity, equity, and inclusion, honesty and integrity, professionalism and excellence, and transparency. So hopefully all of those sound like wonderful values to everyone in this room as well. And let me know if you disagree with any of those, I'd be curious. And our goals are kind of organized into 6 areas. They are sector leadership, programs and services, governance. I just lost my Zoom. What happened? Sorry, bear with me 1 second. It changed. Oh, because you changed the, sorry, there's no longer presenting. So now you're back. Gotcha. Hang on.
You've never left.
You did for me.
Just dropping it because this is like more conversational. No real need to have the PowerPoint up. That's the reason.
Absolutely. No, it just messed with my display for whatever reason.
Sorry about that.
No, you're fine. And the 6 focus areas for our goals are, I think I said, sector leadership, programs and services, governance, organizational structure and staffing, again, DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, and marketing and public presentation. So in our first year, we have 17 different activities that the leadership team at the staff are shepherding through, and we're working to engage the broader staff in those 17 activities. I am not going to tell you what all 17 of those are, but what I do want to do is give you a couple of the kind of combined updates in a couple of different groupings on how some things are changing. So one way is in terms of the organizational structure. So we've made a lot of small and bigger changes in how we are structured as an agency. And the first thing, and one of the things I'm just very, very excited about, is we've expanded our capacity in terms of outreach and communications by hiring an additional manager who will oversee our outreach and communications work. So we still have the public outreach coordinator who has been now Stella Jordan has filled that role, and we still have also Roisin Foley who's doing communications, but we also have a new manager who's really focused on advancing our work in that area. So that's been a big change to add this as like a new group that kind of elevated that work within the agency. And in terms of activities, we've been doing a communications audit, looking at all the different communications channels we use, and we've been looking into what resources it might take to do kind of a web presence refresh. So those are some big initiatives this year that we're looking into. We've also been restructuring our existing groups a little bit in terms of the reporting structure to move more towards thinking about functional areas and skills. So I hope this is interesting to you. If it's not, I apologize. We've kind of organized things in a way where our Director of Policy and Planning, Annette Demscher, who oversees the most directly engaged MPO staff, is overseeing the outreach and communications, and our graphics and editorial teams. So those all sort of are combined together under one director. Our newer Director of Projects and Partnerships, Rebecca Morgan, is now overseeing all of the more like project-oriented teams. So the ones who do the MBTA projects, the transit projects, the traffic projects, the corridor projects, our kind of data and GIS work and the application of our regional travel demand model. Those are now organized under one director. And then Marty Milkovits, who you all have seen here, is still really leading this development of our new set of modeling tools, which is a big piece of the innovation that we're engaging in this year in particular. So all of that has been intertwined with, sadly, the upcoming, I can definitely share it with you, Jen. I don't think it's on our website per se, but I will definitely share the information, so follow up after. We also have had some retirements of some really like longstanding characters at CTPS, and by characters I mean that in the best possible way. just really like people who have made CTPS what we have been for many, many years. We just celebrated Paul Reen's retirement this week, and you may not have seen him as much, but he's just been this immense resource in the area of GIS programming and model development. You know, Bill Kuttner hasn't formally announced a date for retirement, but we've been transferring the freight program over to Sandy Johnston, who now we have a replacement for him working on the UPWP, Sri Lanka. If you haven't met her yet, hopefully you will soon. She just started this week, no, this week or last week. So there's just been a lot of upcoming change. We also have one of the more senior folks that do our corridor studies who's going to be retiring soon. And of course, Anne McGann, who leads the LRTP, has been very vocal about the fact that she'll be retiring before this long range plan is done. So we're thinking about all this reorganization and trying to boost our capacity to make up for the loss of those folks, but it is a big loss and it is not easy to replace. So I just want to call that out. If you see those folks, celebrate that they are with us for a bit longer, because they are part of what's made us who we are for quite a long time. And then I wanted to highlight, you know, a couple of other ways in which we're looking into innovation. Of course, the new travel demand modeling tools are a huge piece of what we're doing. Also, how we're working to do exploratory scenario planning, which I think you've heard about in this group, is a big way in which we're trying to innovate this year. And we've even been looking into just innovating in terms of collaborative tools and technology in this like remote hybrid work environment. So we've adopted tools like Asana so that we can do better in terms of our project management and communication. So I'm very proud of those initiatives. And I mentioned diversity, equity, and inclusion. We are kicking off this year an internal CTPS-focused DEI committee that will really be working with leadership to figure out ways to sort of further advance our investment in DEI in our agency and be more inclusive. And while I want that to be very much ground up within the agency, from the leadership level, we're also very committed. And today I was able to kick off my own participation in a year-long training program that's called YW Lead Boston, which is all about equipping leaders in any industry really with the tools to sort of be able to assess DEI challenges and then support staff through those challenges. So I've committed quite a bit as well into making sure that I can support that group as best as I can. Other well-known people have taken this program. For example, Stephanie Pollock did it while she was Secretary of Transportation. So it's a very well-regarded and very useful program. We've also established a vision for our workplace culture to try to really kind of organize everyone around who we want to be and how we want to interact, especially in this virtual format, which is really easy to lose that in the virtual format. And then we're doing a number of things in which we're trying to engage in the morale and support of staff. We're working on doing a better job of celebrating their accomplishments, investing in professional development, and such as improving project management practices. And we're actually reviewing and revamping just about all of our policies and HR practices, which is a longer process than just 1 year. But we're really looking into how we can be a more sort of staff-supported and oriented agency through our policies as well. So it's not all visible at the moment, but I just wanted to highlight that the staff to the Boston Region MPO, the agency CTPS, is going through a lot of really, I think, positive change. It's going to take us a while, but I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about those. And then I wanted to shift into the policy sphere, the excitement in the policy sphere, also the confusion and lack of clarity. Lynn, before I do that, do you want to say something?
Well, did I miss you mentioning Matt Genova?
Yeah, I didn't, well, he didn't retire. I mentioned some retirements, but I didn't mention his departure. That is obviously a big, that's a big change as well. Yeah. And we are actively recruiting for a new TIP manager. So we are lucky to have the overlap. So he can kind of help us mentor the next person, but it is a big change and a big loss to our agency as well.
I understand why you didn't mention him. So I can barely bring myself to say it. You know, I haven't said anything to him because I don't know if I want to talk to him about it.
Too emotional, too close to the heart.
It's too much. Yeah, it is too much.
Well, we have very talented people, but also an ever-changing world that we're trying to adapt to. So we know we're going to experience both some losses, but also some great, new faces as well. So I would really look forward to you meeting Sean Rourke, our new manager of outreach and communications. I'm sure that'll happen soon, but it doesn't replace the people who are leaving. It just gives us, a forward to look towards, I guess.
I guess my other issue too is that it's Atlanta. They're from New Orleans, and I'm not a big football person, but they are. They were kind of our rivals. So it's like
rivalries.
But he'll learn something from down there. And it's all remote. So we'll drag him back up here, to meetings. So what have you learned in Atlanta?
Yeah, there's a world now where people can participate a little more easily from a distance, and we don't know yet what he's going to be doing next. So we're very interested to hear what that ends up being, if it's anything like what he's doing now, or if it's something completely different. So that'll be interesting to find out.
All right. And then Jen left and went to Boston. So Andy
There's,
in Cambridge. Yeah.
Yeah, Andy left.
Anyways, all right. So that's it for that segment. I think it's all very interesting. I mean, and I don't have any questions because I was kind of involved in the strategic plan, and so
by kind of you mean directly, as in part of a large committee that met a bunch of times to go through all of this stuff. So thank you for your commitment to that, Len. It was very invaluable.
It's all on behalf of the council. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, we hope to show results. That's the intent here. So the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. So a lot of people are referring to this in a lot of different ways. I've been told by our federal partners, we are now supposed to call it the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or the bill, which is confusing because it's a law, but the bill, if you hear me say it, I'm talking about the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. So there is a significant amount of new funding for MPOs identified in the bill. The challenge being, so the bill includes I know, right? The challenge is that the bill does include the new sort of amounts that we can expect and the new surface transportation reauthorization or authorization. But what we're still missing is an apportionment bill from Congress, which is what makes that money kind of a reality. It makes it start flowing to the agencies that need it so that we actually get to access that money and then apply it to our processes. So for now, the FAST Act is still, the prior surface transportation authorization has been extended to February 18th because we don't have that apportionment bill yet. If it expires, the continuation expires and we have the apportionment, then we will be able to start talking about the funds that we have available, both for this current federal fiscal year as well as future federal fiscal years. So we're trying to figure out how to plan for this without completely counting on it because we don't quite know what will happen in a month. But in the meantime, our understanding is that in terms of the planning work that we do, and so this is what the budget you see in the UPWP primarily, the big chunk that funds our planning work as an agency, we expect to see roughly a 17% increase in the coming year. And it's unclear how much of that will come this fiscal year versus the beginning of next fiscal year, because we don't know yet what we're getting and whether it be prorated. But that's a significant chunk of increase in our ability to carry out transportation planning for the region. So we can't just jump into doing that because we have a certain number of staff. And so we're trying to be very creative about, kind of continually bringing capacity on, while, as you well know, we're also losing capacity, but to sort of ramp ourselves up to be ready to use those funds. And one of the things I think you can be very excited for is that we're already talking about, where would that funding, be most useful. And we'll definitely be coming with a UPWP amendment if we do get that chunk of additional funding. But you can certainly imagine that some additional funding could go towards all sorts of initiatives. And I know this group's always been really fond of the discrete studies that go on the table. So maybe there's an opportunity in the future that with staff capacity, we'd be able to fund some more of the discrete studies that we haven't been able to fund in the past, for example. So no clarity exactly on the amounts or exactly where it will go, but keep it near out. And hopefully in a month, we'll know more and we'll be able to come back with some suggestions for how we plan to use additional money. Worst case, we're waiting till next federal fiscal year and we continue as we are for this federal fiscal year. So that's the planning funds. There's also the target funds, right? The funds that go to the capital projects through the TIP, that Matt oversees. And that picture is still a lot fuzzier to us. So one, the sort of the amounts and the availability is a bit fuzzier, but also we face this challenge that's been talked about a lot, both in this group as well as recently in the ad hoc committee on project cost and readiness issues that Len served on as well for the MPO. But we have a problem where we know there's barriers for communities to get projects ready to get funded in the TIP. And so even if we have more money to put towards those target projects, we still are facing this challenge for how can we support municipalities, especially the less affluent or the, kind of the smaller ones, getting more projects ready to be funded through those additional capital funds. So the MPOs across the state are actually all talking about this. And I'm hoping that through some of the coordination with the state and with the RPAs, the MAPCs and others, we can come up with some strategies. But that will be a very interesting topic that I think we should all stay very engaged in the coming months. So I thought maybe the last thing I would highlight is just, I took a note here, sorry, I'm reminding myself, I thought I would mention a little bit more about the ideas we have on what additional funding is really useful towards. For example, we've had a lot of success with launching different kinds of committees or working groups that with more investment could be even more sort of applicable and successful. For example, like the Transit Working Group. We've also been talking about how to better engage folks in some of our funding programs, like the Community Connections Program and the Transit Modernization Program. We've been talking about additional analyses and outreach we can do around equity and inequality. We've been talking about enhancing existing programs, like, for example, the freight program. Of course, I mentioned already discrete studies. The long range plan itself could use more investment in communication and also in carrying through the activities throughout the entire 4 years. And then we're thinking about more ways in which we can sort of communicate and share our work overall. So that's not exclusive. It's not what's the word I'm looking for? All inclusive. There are other things that may come into the picture, but those are some of the directions that we're thinking about, and I certainly welcome any of your input on that. And that was all I thought I'd start off with, and I'm happy to discuss.
Thank you, Tegan. And so give people a few seconds to raise their hands. Otherwise, I'll ask a couple of questions.
You can also bring up completely different things if you think I haven't told you something that you wanted me to talk about. So bring up
Oh, so we have John Queen.
Yeah, that's great to hear that you might provide some more focus on assisting the smaller municipalities in getting things, because they are so understaffed, underfunded. And is that is going to truly be an emphasis point, because they really can use that. So you're going to staff up against that so that you can almost have a consultant in front of them or online with them, or almost at will or on a regular basis to reach their milestones.
So some of the MPOs are talking about kind of outsourcing and having maybe design consultants available for help. They have to advocate through the state and the feds to make sure that that's kind of a good use and available use of the funds.
Yeah.
So there's discussion for advocating for that we're hoping some advocacy can be. On the Boston MPO side of things, my screen just went off. I don't know. Suddenly, of course, I'm having technical difficulties. Let me unput this. Lost you guys again. Matt, did you do something again?
No, I did not. I'm not sure, but I can hear something on your end connecting and disconnecting.
All right. I think I'm good again. For the Boston side, we may be thinking about, do we want to sort of kind of grow the corridor studies or some of the other studies that we do to support some of the regional kind of projects and getting them to a conceptual level of design? That might be one of our tactics that the other MPOs don't actually have the staff capacity to do themselves. So we'll think about a couple different strategies, but this was a really big topic of focus for the MPO members themselves when talking about project cost and readiness challenges.
Well, one of the things I'm going to go to Andy next, is that, especially from my other roles, where I get to focus on a lot of other things, housing in particular. And it's good to see corridor studies that then kind of integrate with other planning going on in those municipalities, especially for those that focus on housing and also, and I know this is a big thing for us, active transportation, but to the extent we can integrate active transportation, sustainability, and more housing as part of those corridor studies, so that we enable the municipalities to make a good case to the state, the feds to the extent necessary, and beyond what we can provide funds as MPO and their residents, because a lot of times things have to go through their town meetings or their city councils. And so with that as a frame, I think we can really advance a lot of different causes at the same time through these corridor studies. So that said, Andy?
So I can definitely add a +1 to the idea of more complete street corridor studies. I know at the statewide level, that's actually one of the most popular programs. I think between all the MPOs is just there's so many old roads designed in 1960s style out there in Massachusetts, and we have a 2020 demand that really we want more safe travel for everybody. I guess one thing that we've been working on recently in Cambridge has been related to the way we engage, in particular with historically excluded communities. And I'm wondering if the MPOs has any idea, or CTPS has any ideas about bringing in historically excluded groups into the process for their ideas, right? Just kind of targeted outreach rather than kind of asking people to be lumped into the group of just general folks. That's kind of one question that I had. Or, you know, as you kind of develop the equity work, I'm sure maybe the answer will become clearer, but I'm curious to know what the primary indications, the first indications are. Then secondly, I was actually curious about maybe more the climate resiliency and the kind of, you know, bracing for climate change work that I think the MPO has started, and whether there's some new stuff on that topic that would be useful for us to think about as we go into 2022.
Yeah, climate resiliency is a theme both for this MPO, but also for the feds and their sort of rollout of all this additional funding. But to answer your first question first, in terms of more targeted outreach. So I think we've been doing I would say staff has been doing, I think, a good job thinking through new strategies over the last few years to have a different kind of conversation than we typically have at like the MPO board meetings, and to work with community partners who already have networks, and to sort of be able to work with them to take the conversation to folks in a different place. And Jen, I'm sure some of this was happening when you were there, and then I know Kate White kind of continued some of those initiatives. And now that we have some increased capacity, it is a very high priority for us to improve how we are reaching the historically unreached and underserved communities. Then you talked about it related to the corridor studies. And that's, I think, another big step here, is that the budgets we have for the corridor studies and the way we map them out right now is not inclusive of it has a public process. But it's a limited public process, and it's typically more sort of leaning on the municipalities themselves to kind of design how they want to have that happen, because it is early stages. But I would love to see us be more thoughtful about what we can propose in those corridor studies with additional resources to be able to do something more inclusive through those processes. So the outreach and communication staff is tasked with thinking through advancing these things, and it's definitely a priority for the MPO to do that outreach. And then your second question was around resiliency, which, yes, we lost somebody who had actually a pretty good focus on resiliency recently as well when Ariel Patterson left. And resiliency needs to be built into many of our programs. We've been building that into our corridor studies, but there's a lot more work we could do in the LRTP and in other ways. And so we're looking into whether we have the resources now to get someone who's more resiliency focused.
Hey, can you hear me okay?
We can. Hi, Anna Christina.
Oh, sorry.
So yes to both of those as being priorities. Yeah. Oh, Len, you're muted.
Sorry about that. So thank you. And next we'll go to Jen.
First, thanks for the update. That was really exciting to hear that there's more funding.
You're very low,
It's not
Jen.
there yet. It's not there yet. That's a caveat.
Yeah. Potential new funding. Am I loud? Is it coming in loud enough?
Your volume's really low.
And there's something off with my volume as well, because my mic is off, so I don't know how you guys are even hearing me.
Your mic's on. It's showing that it's on. So I'll mute
No,
you.
it's on here, but it's connected to an outer mic. You shouldn't be hearing it through the computer, but I don't know what's going on with my sound.
Well, maybe it's just not. Yeah, I don't know what to say about that. And yeah, I don't know what to say. Well, we'll see if we can mute you. So Jen, you can go ahead.
I know if I am too quiet again.
You're still very quiet, but we'll just have to listen harder. So
I'll try. I'll lean in.
Okay. So first question, I was curious if you've heard anything about this, or any of the funding, or through the feds, or through any additional sources might be a little bit more flexible than in the past in terms of outreach and engagement. I know that one of the things we struggled with when I was on staff was like not being able to buy food for events or reimburse participants for their time, stuff like that. Curious if any of that went through the process or.
Yeah, Jen, you'll probably be sad to hear that that's still a conversation. It's still a challenge. That said, what we've been working on is kind of strategies where we can work better with our sister agency, MAPC, which has more sort of varied funding sources, to be able to think about strategies to do that. So our kind of increasing and growing partnership with MAPC is giving us a little bit more room to think. As far as whether there's more flexibility on the federal side and the policy side, I don't know. And it's like a very useful thing for the team to look into. So I really appreciate that suggestion. You had more than one question? I don't recall.
Yeah. My other question was in terms of, you spoke in relation to Andy's question about doing more engagement with traditionally underserved communities through the MPO's own projects. And I was curious also if there were thoughts around how to raise expectations for municipalities and other project proponents on the engagement that they do for projects funded in the TIP.
That's interesting. In the TIP, the revamped TIP criteria, have equity related criteria, but I would say that it probably doesn't get at what you're actually suggesting in terms of trying to hold municipals a little bit more accountable. But one of the things that we can do with additional resources is that we've been asked by the MPO to also largely to address also cost and readiness issues and communication and awareness, is to be much more in contact and much more engaged with the municipal proponents, and not simply kind of having like a once a year, like MassDOT, TIP readiness meeting, but have a lot more engagement throughout the year about statuses of projects. And so through that, we might also be able to reinforce that kind of need and engagement. What I would say is Sean Rourke just started, I don't know, a week or two ago as the new manager of the outreach communications team. And I would say give him at least a couple more days, maybe a few weeks, maybe a month to get his feet under him. And then I would say pose, that kind of question to him as well, as he kind of starts to develop his strategic vision for where to take the outreach work.
Thanks, Jen. And one other thing I'll say with respect to the outreach by municipalities, a lot of times you're just going to run into staff that is, the municipality is short-staffed, or their staffs are working just flat out. So it isn't sometimes for lack of the need to do these things or even the desire to do these things. It's really just a lack of bandwidth to do it. And sometimes you even have the staff, but then your calendar just doesn't allow you to do it. It's just, you're just jammed, and there's only so many hours in a day. And so even though you have the people, it's just like, how do you fit it in? And we push for more public engagement, and we get it sometimes, and then it's like, okay, what are we gonna do now? We don't really have the time to follow through on it. So it's and in those cases, it's a nice problem to have, but it is still a problem. We need to figure out how to deal with it. So it's just another angle on the issue. So Abby.
Hi, great to be here again. It's been a while, I think. I wanted to suggest some freight-oriented things. For instance, doing a little bit more on urban freight management. I think we're all seeing impacts in all our commercial areas, certainly, of difficulty with home delivery companies sharing curb space with other uses. There's been a lot of work done at various academic institutions, New York, et cetera, on different approaches to managing that. And I don't know of anybody who's got the answer yet, but I think we do need to just assess more how large the problem is in this region, and what choices might mesh okay with our other work on future of the curb and complete streets. It's quite the puzzle. So I think you could spend a lot of money on that. Also wanted to sort of pick back up on the effect of transportation management companies on sort of individual and small group mobility, the effect it's having on curb management and on mass transit use, and the taxi industry. Basically what has become of that are all the populations that used to depend on taxis and the other folks who used curb space being adequately accommodated in this day of Uber and Lyft. And then this is just a matter of curiosity, and I really feel like I should know, how are CMAQ funds being spent? And are they being spent in ways that benefit the Boston MPO region? I guess that's more in the realm of how we spend tip money. But it just occurs to me that we haven't seen much of an update on that. And that could do a lot, something to try to help us get a handle on freight emissions.
Yeah. Thanks, Abby. Those are great, great ideas and great comments, and certainly along the lines of some others that we've heard. It's nice. We are in a stage where we've done some work on this future of the curb in terms of kind of like research and looking at examples. And probably one of the next stages of it would be to actually really look at this in practice on the ground and do some assessment, or maybe have a project that actually like looks at the real kind of conditions in a certain location. And if we have enough funding available to do that kind of study, and it's assessed as part of the, maybe the discrete studies that we do, that's a great place for implementing some of that. And it kind of goes along with the work that the state's been doing, the Boston region's been doing some in parallel. And then of course, some municipalities have. The freight program is another place where we can look at those kinds of ideas, but these are largely, I think, kind of those discrete studies where we look at each year the UPWP, which studies we can fund through the funding we have. So that UPWP process is kicking back up again, and we're going to be collecting ideas again and looking at ones that have been proposed in the past. And with additional funding next year, hopefully we can do a little more, because I agree we could spend a lot of money in any one of these topics that are so crucial, but this is one that's been very central to everybody's thinking. And on the CMAQ question, the very specifics we probably want Matt Genova here to talk about, but there is CMAQ funding that's allocated through the TIP process, and it is measured in terms of the air quality impacts. So there is an application of those funds and an assessment of their impact that's part of this whole process. So that would be something to dig into a bit more in the TIP context, with someone like Matt Genova or his eventual replacement, kind of talking through that a bit.
Yeah, and part of that might be to examine how CMAQ funds are being used in other states and regions, because at EPA I deal with regions from all across the country, and I'm learning that some of them spend CMAQ funds on freight rail emissions reduction projects. It's very hard to get freight rail operators to come to the table to EPA to ask for funding to remanufacture or otherwise upgrade their locomotives. And I guess this could apply to the MBTA as well, because they do have quite a passel of older locomotives that are fairly high emitting, in spite of the fact that they're supposed to be using shore power when they're not actually moving.
Yes. Yes, the T funding picture is a whole different animal, but I am not prepared to comment on the level of impact. We must ask the T to give a kind of a breakdown of like what they see envisioned happening. And then the states, the other, element of this as well, where they're also seeing, a big influx of funding. So
yeah,
yeah.
Leave that to them.
That might be a mission for the representatives from the Rider Oversight Committee.
Yeah.
So I think we have our assignment. Thank you. So we're gonna take one, maybe two more questions. I might have one, but if someone else wants to jump in after Andy, I'll be happy to let you go. So Andy.
Yeah, I just pulled up the letter that we had started drafting with the current UPWP, and I just wanted to highlight a couple things that we felt like should not fall off when the new UPWP starts. So definitely the Vision Zero Phase 2, and then the 2 resilience program items that didn't get funded were definitely ones that we just felt like were kind of misses with the current UPWP. So, either if they could be, reconsidered, for the next UPWP, or brought back even earlier if the funding picture becomes much more clear before, well, I guess sometime after February. I think those are things that this committee itself really felt like were things that should not be forgot, I think, when the next UPWP comes around. I think these were 2 things that really just, we were like, it was sad to not see them go through.
Yeah, I hear you. And thank you for referring back to that. We will as well. We know that there is a desire to fund more than we did this current round. So at a minimum, they'll be back on the table for the next round, but if we receive more funding, let's see what we can allocate that to. So thanks, Andy. That's really helpful.
Yeah, Andy, thank you. Thank you very much. I mean, I think we know who's going to be the chair of the UPWP committee this cycle again. So I think the last question will be from me, and I think someone touched on it earlier, and that is staffing and the extent to which you think that the increased funding will allow you to increase staffing in a way that can be maintained. Because I know that, I mean, to a certain extent, the amount of staffing before the pandemic was determined by the physical space that you had. And maybe now, I mean, that's not as much of a restraint, but I know even if you don't have the physical restraint, then there's of course the salary, but let's say increasing staff significantly were an option. Do you have a sense of what you would do?
Yeah, I have like an overall agency vision for the types of skill sets we need, but as far as the individual positions, the managers throughout the agency are kind of thinking about what their staffing needs would be to be able to grow, which is why I mentioned things like we feel like we're missing a resiliency planner right now to be able to really advance some of the resiliency work. I would say that the physical space has been less of a constraint for us, but more so the funding and sort of the certainty of the funding. And the good news about the bill is that it does have the 5-year authorization. And so unless the apportionment, or the obligation authority, which is like, we are then told how much of that money we actually get, which is typically around 90% right now each year, unless that for some reason dramatically changes because, I don't know, nobody pays taxes one year or like, whatever could happen in Congress and with funding. We have a pretty good picture that we have a sustainable funding level for the next 5 years. So that gives us more confidence that on like a year-by-year basis that we can start kind of ramping up now and then sustain that for the 5 years. We, as like many agencies, plan to follow a hybrid model going forward, allowing people to work from home part of the week. We haven't decided exactly what that looks like yet, but one thing we are planning on is that it does make sense to try to have kind of peak times in the office where more people are present to coordinate with our partners. So that sort of like negates the space, like, oh, well, maybe we could just, only have 20% of our staff in office at any time. We still want to have the space to have people able to collaborate in person. I think that touched on a couple of elements of what you're saying. Did I get to what you're saying?
Yeah, you did. And combined with the answer to the previous question, I'm all set. So thank you very much, Tegan. And I really appreciate your time here and also your availability, throughout the year. And so I also always encourage people to reach out to anyone on the staff. You don't have to go through me. And a lot of times I will have follow-up conversations just because you can cover more. The meeting time is limited, but the staff is always willing to make time for any of us. So thanks for encouraging or continuing that attitude, because that was certainly the case on the Carl, and you continued it. So yeah.
Thank you. We serve everyone in the region. So to your point, so we are very open to it, and it's very wonderful to be here and to see everyone again. And I very much appreciate and respect what this group continues to do. I will stay on a little while because I'm going to listen to a little bit of, as much as I can, of Wig's agenda item, and then I'll probably drop off, but at least get to hang out for a little while longer.
Great, thank you. So
John,
Tegan
sorry, John had his hands up. I'm sorry.
Okay, John.
Yeah, Tegan, back on the staffing changes and just the roles that are changing in the staff, is there going to be an accessible to, let's say, the public, people that are interested parties, of a directory, really within the various sectors of who does what and how to contact them if you needed to get questions or follow, items initiated?
Yes, I think if I'm interpreting your question correctly, we actually do have a contact us webpage, a page on our website that does have the groups kind of listed and the staff. And if it's not, and then through various ways of accessing information, it gives you contact information. We're rethinking though what that might look like in the future. So if you have any questions or sort of concerns about how it works, please
Yeah.
let me know, and
Yeah.
we'll take that into account.
Because in the old MassDOT, there was a very complete, like even an org chart that went down, and you could really even hot link on some of those to fairly down in terms of directors or even, let's say, manager level, which really was very helpful. But that level of transparency left a few years ago. So, but that was very helpful at that time.
Check the link that Matt Archer just posted in the chat and see if that answers it. And if not, reach out to us and let us know.
Thanks.
Thank you all. Thanks,
Right,
Len.
thank you. Yeah, you're welcome. We have to boogie along, and John stepped on that nice transition wig from Tegan. But anyways, she is going to stay for Wig's presentation, and Wig is going to talk to us about a big idea that he mentioned at the Rider Oversight Committee at our last full meeting. That I was impressed, given that I have been asking us to think about big ideas in the context of us developing the next long-range transportation plan, LRTP. And I thought this would be a good time to ask Wig to come and talk with the group. So,
yeah, so hi everybody. I have a fair amount of computer power, but I work by myself. I'm hoping somebody else might be able to bring up the presentation. I had emailed it to Len. I can email it to somebody else, but I do these meetings on my laptop, but that's not where all my files are, on my kind of powerful desktop. Len, are you able to bring that up, or maybe shift it over to Matt?
Well, I don't, it'll take me a little while to get it, Wig. I wish you had told me that you were going to do this.
Okay, well, let me just start, if it's okay, with a couple minutes of background.
Sure.
So I have worked for compensation pretty much only in the private sector, and that's been largely in development businesses. So small scale hands-on development when I was young, then later some sustainable oil and gas development, as I call it anyway. We were going into dolomites in areas of Oklahoma that had already been drilled for sandstones, and then some rockweed processing and harvesting from scratch in Maine, including some high pressure liquid chromatography on the cytokinins. And then later got pulled from grad school at MIT to work early on in the South Boston waterfront development. So know John Seward and some others from that. But I've spent 50 to 60,000 hours over the last 25 years on pro bono activities that really just broadly range across land use, transport, environment, and health. And I'm hoping I'll just take another minute and then we'll figure out the presentation. So I actually went to 10 years of MPO meetings working on getting the Green Line in place. Previous to that in Somerville, I had worked with some other activists on trying to transform Assembly Square from parking lots and big boxes, which was all the developers thought was possible, to transit-oriented and denser development with mixed income housing and with upper story jobs. And we did eventually work it out with the developers, and they're all happy now because they've got a lot more development. And they ended up contributing 10 million to the Orange Line station there, which I think was the first heavy transit station in a while in Massachusetts. But later I went to some of the researchers I knew at Tufts Medical and Tufts Environmental and asked them to focus with us from Somerville and others on ultrafine particles from large transportation sources like highways and airports and cardiovascular inflammation, neither of which the scientists had worked on, or did they know each other, but I had a feeling they could work together. And it was really clear to me that the extraordinary health effects to the environmental justice communities next to highways and airports have nothing to do with regional PM 2.5, which is flat. So we have made progress with that. So let me stop there and see Len, if we're able to post that, or should I try to figure it out?
I think Matt's going to be able to bring it up. I found it. I forwarded it to him because I think he's in a better position to bring it up than I am.
Okay,
But
yeah,
sure.
thanks so much, Matt. If you can do that, I have like 20,000 papers on my hard drive and 4,000 abstract collections, but I just don't usually have to do this.
I completely understand. I apologize. So Len just sent me the presentation. I'm just trying to pull it up right now. I think
Yeah, it's okay.
taking a
Take
second
your
to come
time.
through.
So this is just 9 slides that I threw up in some empty time at the last rock meeting with Len. And it happens to be one small collection of big ideas, and I can round out around it, but I'm also happy to answer questions during it. And I've been trying to think the last couple years about, what next? The Green Line in Somerville and the community paths are really sufficient for a 4 square mile community with regard to large attention from the region. I mean, I super appreciate them, especially given the presence of I-93 and, more diesel rail than any other city per square mile and more people per square mile. But I think we're good to go. And Somerville's fate is in its own hands at this point. We need better live-work balance because we're largely residential, having lost the manufacturing economy. And that residential largely supports the huge imbalance in Boston and Cambridge, which just have, fortunately, a lot of new regional jobs, but lack live-work balance by about housing for 750,000 people. So Boston is short live-work balance of about for 600,000 resident people relative to jobs, and Cambridge is short 150,000 people, and that affects Cambridge, or Somerville rather. Okay, so Matt, how are you doing?
Truth be told, I think it's just an email problem. There seems to be a delay between Len sending it to me and me receiving
Okay,
it.
well, let me just set it up. So
I think I got it. So there we go.
Okay, thank you, Len.
Okay,
no problem.
So this was just, and some of this data is old, but with this is kind of climate oriented data, and it's a long-term issue. So this first slide just shows, it's a Massachusetts greenhouse gas slide from a few years back, and it just shows how dominant transportation is with regard to the sector that really is the one that has to be tackled. Although I have more background in development and residential, really, I think the building sector is moving along quite well. And I think people naturally understand it, but I don't think everybody has a sense of the staggering amount of conventional fuels we use in transportation. And so that, I think that's enough for that slide, unless other folks want to look at it more. Okay, so this is just more national data. It's a little bit more up to date. EIA, does a lot of job with data these years. So it's a couple of years old, but basically shows that on the left that transportation dominates. And if you look down below, you see the dominance of transportation relative to residential and commercial property. And then on the right-hand side, there are some fuel figures, and they show, we're pretty much dominated by conventional hydrocarbons, petroleum and natural gas. Nuclear is what it is. Hydro kind of is what it is. And then we've got some other stuff going on. Okay, I think that's probably enough for that one.
Quick question on that one, Wig.
Yeah, sure.
So on the right hand, we have other renewables in green, nuclear red, hydrogen in blue, liquid biofuels in yellow, But there's another one there. There's this one. What's this one?
Well, that's hydro, I think. The
That's
one
hydro?
that's passing, it looks like, well, it could be coal.
Okay. Oh, coal.
It
All
looks
right.
like
I'm
it's
sorry.
colored for
Yeah, I'm
coal.
sorry. I missed coal when I was reading the list. So okay, got it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's
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 my
Senator Manchin.
yeah. That's very good. All right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so this is again from the feds, and this chart just staggers me. I just want to precede it by saying one thing that I'm not going to talk about. People may not realize the US has now 3 times as much on-land wind power as any other country. And that's really because the big farmers caught on that if you've got 10,000 acres of wheat and cornfields, you may as well put up some wind turbines. But this is offshore wind, and this is an opportunity. These data go to technologies already deployed off of China, which has very quickly become the world leader, but also the same technologies deployed in the North Sea off of Europe for a number of years now. So this is not future technology, it's current technology. And when they look at all the US states, I mean, look at Maine and Massachusetts, it's just staggering. Now I've rounded these up because these are a little old. So I think of Maine is able to produce 35 times the state's total electric use with current offshore wind technology. And Massachusetts is able to produce 20 times its total electric use with current offshore wind technology. And these things do not have to be in the faces of the Nantucket billionaires anymore. These are technologies that are further offshore. And you know, it happened that on Nantucket, both the ultra liberal and the ultra conservative billionaires didn't want the wind turbines in their faces, but this stuff can be quite a bit further out. And Maine and Massachusetts together consume just about exactly 50% of all the electricity in New England. So you don't have to get too far into this current opportunity before you could supply 100% of New England's electricity or twice 100% of New England's electricity with offshore wind using current technologies. And so to me, that is a that's kind of a must do from my kind of perch in Somerville. And the 2 states have different trajectories right now. Massachusetts, from what I know, seems to be doing great. You can't snap your fingers and do all of this at once. And we've got a number of lease areas that are under development. New Bedford, which is the largest fishing community or city in all of the United States, including Alaska. They land more dollar volume in New Bedford than anywhere else in the United States. And they are also the first location for offshore wind support. So, you know, all the power to them. Maine, where my heart is and where the rest of my family live, is just got everybody fighting. The environmentalists, including Brownie Carson, who I went to college with at Bowdoin, have been fighting all of the power corridors. And the power corridors are probably being pushed into the wrong locations. And the lobstermen are just focused on lobstering because Penobscot Bay is a sweet spot right now. But the water temperatures are changing quickly. Connecticut used to have a pretty good lobster business. They now have 1 lobsterman in the whole state of Connecticut. And Maine is going to lose its lobster business in a few decades. And they have by far the most coastline and the most percentage employment in nearshore businesses of any state short of Alaska, whose data I don't really know. So next slide. And there's a hand up. I'm happy to take a question.
Hey, Wig, it's Andy from Cambridge. Back on the previous slide, I just wanted
Yeah.
to get a sense that statewide load figure, is that for one of the 2 years that's listed here, 2016 or 2015, or is it kind of an estimate of future electricity load required for, for buildings to electrify, vehicle
No, I think
electrification?
it's,
just
I
kind of
think
current
it's,
at the moment.
I think it's pretty current.
Okay.
I did look up the state's current use about a week ago. That's where I got the information on those two states being 50%. Maine is less dynamic population than Massachusetts. I would be surprised if Maine's power consumption varied much year to year. And some other people on this call, I'm sure, would be better about Massachusetts power than me. So thanks, Andy. And there looks like there's another hand up.
Yes, Anna? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I don't know what's going on with the mic still, but anyway, I was gonna say, I was on the first leg of the Vineyard Wind project. Went out and we cored some of the seafloor to figure out what foundations for turbines out there. And we had a lot of trouble with the fishermen there. And I can tell you that a lot of the people, because coming from China and also the English are very big, the North Sea, very big on the offshore technology. One of the big arguments they made was the English fishermen are happy because fish and other creatures, sea creatures, love to nest around the base of these turbines. They're completely protected. So I don't know if that can be something you can use for Maine, but I thought I'd chip that in for you.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And even if these go quite a bit further off, if they are grounded in the seabed, I don't know why there couldn't be artificial reefs created that would be really helpful for exactly what you're talking about, for creation of more ecology. The ocean is like the land. Most of the life is in the first couple hundred feet, or certainly the first 1,000 feet. There's not a lot of life in the mid-Atlantic ridge, 30,000 feet down. There's some sulfur-based life, but there's not a lot of life in the real depths. So I think that's a great idea. I think it should be investigated. So I'll move on if there's no other questions. So this is just, I was fooling around one day. I have a digressive mind. So if I get off track here, just pull me back. But one day, I just went through all the T stops, including the Green Line, which is a little different, and where they were. And I think what you'll see on the right-hand columns is that, and my interpretation is that the Boston Transportation Plan Review, really a spectacular foundation for rebuilding the transit system here, including modernization of the Red Line and the Orange Line, and the Blue Line is in great shape now. That really, I think, put foundation again under Boston and Cambridge and some of the outlying regions. But 90% of the assets are in Boston and Cambridge. And that is great for our kind of reborn economy that's life sciences oriented, a little bit finance oriented, and a little bit other entrepreneurship oriented. But it leaves people beyond the reach out, at least with regard to people who would be populations that rely on transport. And of course, electrified transport has the advantages we've just talked about. It is much more easily shifted to sustainable energy. So this is by way of leading into what I'm going to show next. But you can see the colors here. To the north, you've got a number of stations into some of the north of Mystic communities like Malden. You've got a number of stations into Revere on the Blue Line, and Mattapan high-speed line, which one of our T-Rock members is fanatic about, has some sharing across boundaries. But by and large, and Brookline I include in the Cambridge and Boston group mostly. They separated out, I think, originally because they wanted to protect their water supply, but obviously Brookline is part of Longwood Medical and this life sciences based economy. Next slide. Thank you. So here, this is again just a public data source looking at environmental justice, and I've kind of circled Boston and Cambridge with the blue outline, and then I've circled the north of Mystic communities in red. And you may have noticed already that the most intense problems with COVID have been in these in kind of lower Mystic environmental justice communities. But they're not really connected to our current economy. You know, the blue line actually lost lower percent of riders. The buses to the northeast of the Mystic lost fewer bus riders. Those are just indications of the population and the workforce up there. And they just do not have really great direct connections into this economy. And that hurts everybody because they're providing a lot of the blue collar workers, they're providing a lot of nurses, they are providing the trucking and distribution business to some extent with the Chelsea market and other places in Everett and Revere. But so that's the purpose of this slide. Next slide.
Sorry, I just wanted to acknowledge that Steve Olenoff has his hand up.
Yes, sure, Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going back to the wind turbines because you didn't really explain it. Well, I mean, what do you mean by the potential that's out there? I mean, is that saying you're packing the windmills in every way you can, as close together as you can, and that's what you call
yeah, so this data, this is not my data. This is the National Energy I don't know, brain trust data. So my interpretation of this, it's a great question, but my interpretation of this is that these are spaced similarly to the spacing off of China and in the North Sea of Europe. These tend to be put on quite regular grids, depending on the ability of the bottom to support them. You know, these have obviously new high efficiency cabling that are connecting those grids and bringing them on shore. So these are generally not odd shaped wind fields, and they need to have shipping channels between them. They need to not really be stealing wind from each other. So I think these are fairly well spaced. Now, the heights of these are pretty big.
They start a certain distance offshore, which would be not, they would still might be visible, but they may be not visible, but they're far enough shore to not bother anybody.
Yeah, they will be visible if they use the largest scales. I mean, GE is one of the few large international players in this business. And you may have noticed they recently split off their energy business. I mean, I couldn't be more delighted that GE has gone back to its manufacturing origins and away from just financial markets, which happened under Jack Welch. But yeah, these are set out on very regular grids for a number of purposes, deploying them, not blocking the shipping channels, collecting the energy efficiently. There are downtime issues if you've got a huge regional storm and you want to, you know, these not only do not work when there's no wind, but they tend to shut them down when there's too high a wind as well, and let them ride out the storm.
And are these also taking into consideration sensitive areas for whales and things like that?
Yes. Yeah, they're and I would bring up again New Bedford. The Boston Globe did a terrific series recently with the Portland Press Herald on Penobscot Bay and lobstering and stuff. But the fact that New Bedford is embracing both its ongoing role as the largest fishing port in the United States and support of offshore wind is really encouraging to me, because you want these people supporting each other's solutions. You know, you kind of want what's happening in Massachusetts and not what's currently happening in Maine, where these interests are fighting and just trying to block each other, rather than figuring out how to work together. And in Maine, they have issues with the whales too. And the lobstermen object to small areas of whale set aside seasonally. I don't understand it. And I was in a near shore rockweed business that harvested from boats, not from shore, for a number of years. And my family goes back 4 and 5 generations in Maine. They should be cooperating on this stuff.
Just so you know, like about 13 more minutes, okay?
Yeah, sure, thanks. I'll speed it up a tiny bit. There's not too much left though. So I also noticed that when the federal opportunity zones came out, the inner core opportunity zones are dominant on the lower Mystic and north to Lynn. And, you know, these have often been kind of financially oriented and offshore investor oriented, not meaning in the water, but just offshore financial markets, and more aimed at kind of the financial benefits of using an opportunity zone than what it sounds like. I mean, that's my interpretation, to be honest. I mean, I've popped into these off and on for a few years, but you know, there's an extraordinary amount of acreage that some of it is in Charlestown and some of it is in Cambridge and Somerville and Medford, but most of it is northeast of the Mystic, the communities that have largely been left out of the modern economy. And that is another reason I think that we should try to integrate them more to the core. And that's the purpose of this slide. The blue line is modern. It works well, but it doesn't go far enough and it doesn't connect well enough to our other lines. Next slide. This is just a small, this is an odd slide that was opportune. I happened to notice the data one day, and it shows $1 million filings. So the darker the color, the more millionaires there are. And there's a pretty big gap between the Boston Cambridge core, which has an extraordinary density of millionaires at this point, and some of the Tony or North Shore communities. And so that also is an area that probably shows that the population there is on average a lot lower income, and it's also on average a lot higher exposed to things like I-93 and some of the industries. Next slide. So these are my concluding slides, and then we can use any remaining minutes to talk. And I do want to have one addendum at the end. So, you know, I always was taken with phase 3 of Urban Ring. The first 2 phases were not steel-wheeled. And I was in many of those meetings with Stephanie Pollock when she was at CLF. And we were both focused on talking about phase 3 Urban Ring. And there are a number of different routes that could be taken. This was, I think, one of them originally. The numbers that I just have never been able to forget were that the projected ridership for the Urban Ring was 300,000 direct trips a day on the ring itself, and 150,000 trips of capacity created in the other major transit facilities of the core. So a total of 450,000 trips per day. At the end of the day, this project got balkanized. It got more and more described not as a ring, but as a series of short legs. And then eventually it got focused on just for its bus, its bus pieces in the same areas, and not for unified rail on steel track. And the last slide is the next one, Lynn, if you can pop that up. And I super appreciate this, Lynn. So I just have been wondering, it's really clear that Harvard Alston is created because 100 years ago, the major university campuses were put on the edges of the cities where the land was. And the medical schools and the really technical and science stuff was put in the core where the hospitals were. That's where we got all these dual campuses from in our large research universities. But with cell biology, genetics, immunology leading our region economically and leading science globally now, the campuses have had to move back in. That's the reason for Harvard Alston. It's a disaster for Harvard to have science in Harvard Square and its leading researchers in Longwood. And Alston is the bridge for that. And similarly, I think at the end of World War II, people would not have expected MIT to be the leading center of biological research in the world, and Kendall Square. But that, MIT is extraordinarily entrepreneurial. And if you just look at Broad, that Eli Broad brought his fortune from Los Angeles in California to Kendall Square speaks volumes. And the Broad and the Koch and several of the other institutes in Kendall have been the leading institutes of their type in the world. California has a lot more scale if you look at the whole state, but there's nowhere close to Kendall Square in Longwood. Years ago, I do a fair amount of advanced environmental epidemiology from the work I started on highway ultrafines and cardiovascular inflammation. A few years ago, I looked at all of the large NSF grants and NIH grants in the country. Harvard's teaching hospitals, the biggest ones, were equal to the total of Johns Hopkins or Mayo or MD Anderson in Houston. Added together, they are getting 5 times as much NIH research, leading edge research money, as anyone else in the country. And MIT is similar in National Science Foundation grants. Fortunately, our out of region competitors don't add that stuff up, but it's extraordinary. But anyway, so the main connection that's really been needed to be made from a research point of view is Longwood to Kendall via Harvard Alston's new campus. But there's no reason to extend it around or in a ring-like form. The Grand Junction, you would need to take over a Green Line branch or to do something else to get to the edge of Longwood. You would need to tunnel under Longwood, I think, if you wanted to make it easy, but that's not that hard these days. But then you've got Grand Junction the whole rest of the way up to Lynn, or excuse me, over to Chelsea. So that was what I presented kind of impromptu at the T-Rock and what Lynn so kindly asked me to present to you guys. I do want to say one other thing. It's just a sentence or two. Another real big gap that I'm really concerned about is that the environmental justice population is really affected health-wise by ultrafine particles, not by anything that EPA regulates right now, and by transportation noise, which at higher volumes operates through similar parts of the immune system. And so you've got the EJ population, you've got pollutants that are unregulated, which is really causing their health effects, but electrification fixes that. And here is the clinger, which is driving me crazy for 4 or 5 years. all of the immune cell biologists understand that particulate matter works through inflammasome biology and a thing called the NLRP3 inflammasome. If you take your cell phone or computer and look up NLRP3 and hit images, you will see that every diagram has particulate matter coming into the immune cells and driving the immune reaction. Less than 1 in 1,000 air pollution scientists knows that, including the people at Harvard and including EPA. There is a huge intellectual gap between environmental justice, which pollutants affect them, and the biological pathways that tie that together. So that's it for me. If there's a couple other questions, I'm happy to answer. John, and then Franny, you guys are both muted, but John, go ahead.
Yeah, and that will be it.
Thanks, Zig. Oh, Wig. Ziggy Wig. I would imagine, given that this last slide and such, that you would be a huge fan of accelerating the development of West Station, incorporating the Grand Junction as part of the straightening of the the whole I-90 project, as well as incorporating, let's say, either the DMUs or the electrified multi-units on that for both reverse commute and inward commute, inbound commute. And given that West Station also as an asset would be multimodal with buses, which will be electrified at some point, as well as the rail component. You almost have part of your urban ring with that.
Right. So I'm really focused on matching the carrying capacity of the transit to the corridor need. So I have no confidence that electrified buses, which pay a huge penalty for battery weight, can in one corridor serve 300,000 people a day. I think in the right locations and the right ridership, they make a lot of sense. I'd much rather see induction power, which you can do with buses or BRT, than battery power. You're always going to need some battery for backup. But, Nam Su, who was legendary head of mechanical engineering, invented induction power for road-based transit a long time ago. And that can be done. But I'm also concerned about the volume. This is much higher volume than any of our current subways. And so I think if you're doing the ring itself, but yeah, I love multimodal.
Also, as a follow-up, your position on the north-south rail, I would imagine is positive.
And in a word, Wig, yes, right?
Yeah, I love EMUs for commuter rail.
We're gonna move to Franny because we're running out of time.
Yeah,
so
sorry.
That's a big one. So yes is an answer.
Okay.
So all right.
Hi, Franny.
Hi. Sadly, that was one of my questions. I sort of had three big questions. One was, how does the north-south rail link fit into these images? Another is, first of all, thank you. It's so interesting. I see all these great ideas and I see frustration. What do you think the best route to getting some of the kind of changes you see as important?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And the 10 years I went to the MPO was because I was trying to get the Green Line. And I think with regard to activism, you have to push until you win, but I don't think you have any way of knowing. I wrote those comment letters every year. And, 1 year I wrote my comment letter on the plan and I was late as usual. I hand delivered it to Federal Transit in Kendall Square, and then I hand delivered it to EPA in Boston, and it got to the MPO before me. It got to CTPS before me by courier. And then a month later, the federal government put the state on transportation conformity probation for not moving ahead with the Green Line. So that would not happen now, but Massachusetts was the last state in the United States, all of whose land area was in violation of the Clean Air Act. That was my lever, but it really didn't work until one day it just worked, but it was certainly not predictable to me. I think, you know, if you're in it to accomplish these things, if you don't have a never give up attitude, you're probably not going to get there.
Okay.
And
I just don't see how the north-south railing fits in. So I'd love to, if you just write that to us for
Yeah,
another
I can just say one sentence on that. I think it's a terrific idea, and absolutely EMUs are a terrific idea. And I think it will increase ridership. There'll be more frequent. All of that is good. It's never going to have the ridership of the core transit though, but it's a great idea.
And you know, Franny and Wig, perhaps we can talk about this a little bit more in this next segment when we talk about focusing on regional ideas, being transportation, and also how we can explore more of these big ideas for the LRTP. And first, I mean, I think we want to think about the dreaming phase, and then later on the more pragmatic phase. But I playfully asked John Seward to lead the charge on that in the last meeting, and the same with Franny on the regional interests. And like I said, that was playful. And so now it's really a matter of finding out if indeed you two would like to lead the charge on those two issues. And if you do, how we approach them would be up to you. And by that, I just mean that you would propose to us how we go forward with them. I hope I'm not putting you two on the spot again, but
I don't
but
remember ever being put on the spot before, but now I feel put on the spot. I don't know what, are you saying for this discussion, you want us to go loose with our big ideas?
Well, in the case of you, Franny, I think I would like to see us focus more on regional transit. Not so much transportation. Of course, transit is part of transportation, but the RTAs, and it's kind of building on Coletta Frank's presentation to us, and see what we can do, to help the MPO, help them, and how we can develop, be part of a statewide cohesive policy program on RTAs.
Yeah.
Think about it. It's certainly something that I want to pursue. And I'm willing to lead it. But at the same time, I feel that it's important, first off, to get other people involved in leading things. And I like to delegate. But if delegating doesn't work, then if something's important, I'm certainly going to jump in, and do it until someone else wants to do it.
You're not talking during this meeting. I'm willing to sort of be a receiver of ideas about and answer of questions, since I sort of been involved with RTA things for a little while. In the next few months, you're talking, right? You're not talking
well, as we move towards.
You're not talking the next 10 minutes. You're talking about something that you want to do.
Oh yeah, for months. And it'll be part of the LRTP process. So we wanted to try to develop some ideas. Like I said, initially, big ideas, which are more idealistic, and then try to hone down on something that's more pragmatic as we get into the final phases of the LRTP. And that's the combination with the overall MPO initiatives. But we can go beyond that. So all right. Well, I'll take that as a tentative yes.
So
it sounds good and important. And I just came from the monthly meeting of the Regional Transportation the RTA Advisory Coalition, Advocacy Coalition. which I would encourage all of you to talk to your legislators about the RTA advancement bill.
Right.
Now is the time.
Right.
So, but
Right.
yeah.
Thank you. And so we'll make that a part of the regular agenda. And some months you may have something substantial to say, other months you may have very little to say, but hopefully as the months go on, there'll be something more significant, and we'll devote an appropriate amount of time, for what you want on the agenda. And I'll consult with you as we're putting together the agenda to find out how much time you'd like. Okay.
Yeah. And John,
Great.
what was John's description?
Well, I was going to say that I'm echoing you, Franny. And I'm happy to participate and put a good deal of effort to this. I don't want to do it on my lonesome. I'd like a little bit tighter précis about precisely what we're doing and hoping to accomplish. But I think RTAC has a great opportunity to move the needle in transportation planning and to get more transformative projects going. And to have projects that are better integrated, that provide better network effects and produce better value, both for the cash investment and for the region as a whole.
Well,
Is there anybody else here that who would like to sort of host this with me and John, a sort of monthly push or check-in or learning related to RTAs?
I will certainly work with you all, and this is me. Last time I kind of brought it up. I just kind of tossed it out there. This time there's a little more flesh on it, and let's in the next meeting, devote significantly more time to this. As John said, we could tighten it up. And then see how people feel about it if they want to participate, and if people, after thinking about it for a little while, go, it's a bad idea. Well, okay, it's a bad idea. We tried. We'll try something else. So that'll be it for the item this month. And I'll touch base with both of you all before next month. But like I said, we'll spend more time on this next month in our formal meeting. Okay.
Franny, if you send a calendar link, I'll definitely try to attend and find out if I can help you.
Okay.
Right.
Great.
So let me see what time it is. Oh, 10 after. Well, so we have 5 minutes. I don't have executive report because there have been no meetings since our last meeting. And the January 6th meeting was canceled. So our next meeting for the MPO board will be on the 20th. So I don't know the agenda at this point. So I had been initially, when I was first chair, sending out the agenda to folks and asking if you have any questions. I got very little feedback from that. If people want me to start doing that again, I will. But I certainly urge all of you all to check the calendar, and if you see something on the agenda that you would like me to address, meaning by that I mean you have a question or concerns that you'd like me to address, I'll be happy to do that on your behalf. And I would love to say to the board, when I say something, it's like, well, it's not just me asking this. One of my members asked me to ask this. So that's that on that. So I have no new business of my own. Anyone else? Let me pull up participants so I can see all the hands. Yeah.
I'm just going to share in the chat. I don't know if the link's going to come, and if it doesn't, I'll share it separately, about the RTA advancement bill. Let's see. Yeah, I don't think the link went in, so I'm going to go get it and put it in the chat. So don't close up yet.
Okay, yeah, and Matt, if you could grab the chat and maybe send it to folks, that would be great. Certainly would help me because I can't read the chat and pay attention to sharing these.
Sure, I can absolutely do that. We have not gotten anything pertinent to the current discussion at the moment, but I will keep you up to date.
Yeah, well, there's stuff from the representative from the APA that was really interesting. She had some links in the Abby, I think, I really would like to check out later on. Yeah, good.
Okay, I'm sharing the link to the information about the bill. And if you wait a second, I'm going to share which legislators really need to be contacted.
Right.
I mean, they all should, but some.
Well, yeah, it's probably members of the Joint Transportation Committee. And my understanding too is that everything's supposed to be reported out of the committees by the first week of February. And it may be a little late, but don't count on that. And so try to get your letters in maybe before the end of the month. So have I covered everything? I think so. And so I have no other business, new business at all. I'm not seeing any hands from anyone else. And so I think if Franny's,
I'm just saying, copying one more link for people.
sure. Well, when you say, Franny, I will then ask for someone to give a motion to adjourn, but not before you say so.
Okay, so this last link is the people who have yet to sign the letter, but did co-sponsor the bill. And so I guess it's encouraging them to sign the letter. So I'm going to just put that in there. And then I've done my activism for the hour. Okay.
Thank you, Franny. So will you give us a motion to adjourn?
Yes. So moved.
Second.
Thank you. And with that, if there are no objections, then you have 5 seconds to raise your hand if you have an objection. We are done with our first meeting of the year. So thank you, everyone. I think it was a good meeting. I certainly enjoyed it.
See you. Yeah.
Bye.